This is a special edition of PFTPM that explains in a little more detail the current trial happening in Los Angeles involving the massive class action against the NFL over the Sunday ticket product. This kind of snuck up on everyone, and it drew a lot of attention last week when the numbers were reported as to the high end of the damages that could be at issue here for the NFL, $7 billion. And under antitrust laws, those damages get trebled. So $21 billion, worst case scenario for the NFL, depending upon how this goes. So I've got a lot of questions about what is this regarding? How does it work? How did we get here? Where do we go? How does it affect me as a fan of the National Football League? And the case was actually filed. It gives you an idea of how long it takes for plenty of legal cases to percolate all the way through to a trial. It was filed in 2015, 9 years ago, by a San Francisco pub known as the Mucky Duck, and it challenges the way the NFL sells the Sunday ticket package. A couple of different issues that we'll get to as to the potential antitrust violations. And antitrust law, in a nutshell, as it relates to the NFL, goes like this. You've got 32 different businesses, even though they operate under the shield. They are 32 distinct businesses. There was a U.S. Supreme Court case from 2010 called American Needle that ultimately ruled against the NFL on this idea that the 32 businesses aren't one joint concern. They are 32 independent businesses. So they can't come together and set prices. They can't come together and do things that independent businesses would otherwise do. Now, they have the license to do it as it relates to the collective bargaining agreement and their interactions with the players. Salary cap, the draft, the free agency, all those things would be violations of antitrust law if there wasn't a union that crossed the lines among the 32 different teams. For everything else, you've got potential antitrust liability if you're working together as 32 businesses operating in one solitary combined concern. The exception, the big exception, is the broadcast antitrust exception dating back to 1961. You hear that from time to time on PFT Live or at PFT. The league can come together, the 32 different businesses, as one to sell TV rights to over-the-air broadcast networks. That has allowed stability, revenue sharing. You don't have the Cowboys selling their rights to one network for a gigantic sum of money. The least attractive team out there, and you know who they are. I don't need to name names and piss off their small fan base, but you know who they are. They would get far less money if it was every team for themselves, and it would be harder to get the teams to come together and share all the money if it was Cowboys do their deal, Patriots do their deal, Packers do their deal, every team do their own deal. So the antitrust exemption has been very useful to the NFL, and they got it from the federal government through Congress in 1961. And that's one of the reasons why we can't have Friday night or Saturday games from the second weekend in September until the second weekend in December. That's part of the trade-off for this broadcast antitrust exemption. Otherwise, we'd probably have a lot of Friday or Saturday games between the middle of September and the middle of December. So that's what has allowed the NFL traditionally to go to NBC, Fox, CBS, ESPN, ABC, wherever, and say, you get whatever games we give you. You can't just buy the games of any one team. You're buying a package from the league, and we will tell you every May what games you're going to get. The problem emerged as it relates to the Sunday ticket package. And I've always thought that the entire Sunday ticket concept, the way that it's marketed and sold to the end user, might be an antitrust violation. And there's a couple of legal issues that are going to need to be addressed at some point, inevitably, because the broadcast antitrust exemption was set up for broadcast over-the-air TV. You could argue that it doesn't apply to cable. You could argue it doesn't apply to satellite. You could definitely argue it doesn't apply to streaming. And that's something that's just kind of floating around out there that maybe the NFL is going to find itself in the middle of at some point, and they might use this case to try to get a ruling that settles the issue and that folds the broadcast antitrust exemption into streaming and satellite and cable and everything but get your rabbit ears on your TV and grab whatever signal is coming out of the sky. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The limits of the broadcast antitrust exemption, and they're being tested here because the easy answer would be throw the case out. We have an antitrust exemption. And at one point, the case was thrown out, possibly on that argument. I don't know specifically why the case was dismissed, but it was restored on appeal. It's one of the reasons why it's taken so long to get to trial. So now we're at trial, and it's a class action. And look, a lot of companies hate class actions, and a lot of consumers hate class actions because we've all gotten that notice at one point or another. You get the letter, and you can tell it's some legal mumbo jumbo, and you can opt in or you can opt out or you can do whatever. And if it all works out, you get a coupon or, a 50-cent piece in the mail, and the lawyers get all the money. But keep this in mind. The class action is a device that is aimed at creating an incentive for lawyers to pursue companies that are doing something they shouldn't be doing that is affecting a lot of people a little bit. Because for most people, okay, if you go to a lawyer and say, I'm getting screwed by this big company and it cost me $5, the lawyer's not going to take the case. You need to create an incentive for the lawyer to take that case because the lawyer isn't going to get compensated for his or her time if at the end of the day the damages are $5. But if you can find 10 million people who have been affected by that same amount, you got a $50 million class action, and there's a greater incentive to take on the case. Now, here, if you're looking at billions of dollars, that's the incentive to go after the NFL for the allegation that there was some sort of antitrust violation. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.